Hello everyone and welcome to the video. Today we're going to be doing the second project on FreeCodeCamp, which is a part of the responsive web design course. We're going to be doing the Learn Basic CSS by building a cafe menu. So let's get started with step 1. As you learned in the next few steps of the Cap Photo app, there's a basic structure needed to start building your web page. So we need to add our doc type HTML tag, and then underneath that our HTML language set to English. Okay. Then we're going to add a head element. Then a title. Cafe menu. Awesome. The title is one of the several elements that provide extra information that is not visible on the web page, but it is useful for search engines or how the page gets displayed. Inside the head element, nest a meta element with the attribute name charset set to UTF-8 to tell the browser how to encode the characters for the page. Note that the meta elements are self-closing. Okay. Step 4. To prepare to create some actual content, add a body element below the head element. Step 5. It's time to add some menu content. Add a menu and an element within the existing body element. This will eventually contain pricing information about coffee and desserts offered at the cafe. The name of the cafe is Camper Cafe. Add a H1 element within your main elements. Give it the name of the cafe in capitalized letters to make it stand out. Step 7. To let visitors know that the cafe is founded in 2020, add a P element below your H1 element with the text established 2020. Step 8. There will be two sections on the menu, one for coffees and one for desserts. Add a section element within the main element so that you have a place to put all the coffees available. Step 9. Create a H2 element in the section element and give it the text coffee. Up until now, you've been limited regarding the presentation and the appearance of your content you create. To start taking control, add a style element within your head element. You can add a style to an element by specifying the style element and setting a property for it like this. In the previous step, you used a type selector to style your H1 element. Center your H2 and P elements by adding a new type selector for each one to the existing style element. You now have three types of selectors with the exact same styling. You can add the same group of styles to many elements by creating a list of selectors. Each selector is separated with commas like this. Delete all three existing type selectors and replace them with one selector that has centers for the text for H1, H2, and P elements. Awesome. Step 14. You have styled three elements by writing a CSS inside the style tags. This works, but since there will be many more styles, it is best to put these styles in a separate file and a link to it. We have created a separate styles CSS file for you and switch the editor view to that file, which you can see here. Here you have your HTML and your CSS file. You can change between these files with the tabs at the top of the editor. Start by rewriting the styles you have created into the styles CSS file. Make sure to exclude the opening and closing styles tags. Now that you've done that, go ahead and remove the style element and all of its contents, but once it's removed, the text that was centered will shift back to the left. You need to link a styles CSS file so that the styles will be applied again. Nest a self-closing link element within the head element. Give it a rel attribute to styles sheet and href attribute to the value of styles.css. Okay, so for the styling of the page to look familiar on mobile as it does on desktop or laptop, you need to add a meta element with the special content attribute. Add the following within the head element. So we'll just copy paste this and put it within our head element. Step 18. The text is centered again, so the link to the CSS file is working. Add another style to the file that changes the background color property to brown for the body element. So we'll go here, background color brown. Oh. There we go. The brown background makes it hard to read. Change the body's element background color to burly wood so that it has some color but you are still able to read the text. There we go. The div element is used mainly for design layout purposes, unlike other content elements you have used so far. Add a div element inside your body element and then move all of the other elements inside to the new div. Meaning they want your div element within your body element, but everything that was already inside your body element also has to be within your div element. Step 21. The goal now is to make a div not take up the entire width of the page. The CSS width property is perfect for this. Create a new type selector in the style sheet that gives your div element a width of 300 px. So comments on CSS look like this. In your style sheet, comment out the line containing the background color property and value so that you can see the effect of only styling div element. This will make the background color white again. Now use the existing div selector to select the background color of the div element to be burly wood. Now it's easy to see that the text is centered inside the divider element. Currently the width of the divider element is specified in pixels. Change the width property's value to be 80%. It makes it 80% of the width of its parent element body. Next, you want to center the div horizontally. You can do this by setting its margin left and margin right properties to auto. Think of the margin as an invisible space around the element. Using these two margin properties, center the div element within the body element. So far you've been using the type selectors to style elements. A class selector is defined by a name with a dot directly in front of it like this. So remember, there's type selectors and then there's class selectors. Change the existing div selector into a class selector by replacing div with the class named menu. To apply the class's styling to the div element, add a class attribute to the div element's opening tag and set its value to menu. Just like that. Since the cafe's main product sale is coffee, you could use an image of coffee beans for the background of the page. Delete the comment and its context inside the body. Now add a background image to use the value, this link. So we'll copy that. We'll get rid of this. Background image. It's looking good. Time to start adding some menu items. Add an empty article element underneath coffee. It will contain the flavor and price of each coffee you currently offer. Article elements commonly contain multiple elements that have related information. In this case, it will contain a coffee flavor and a price for that flavor. Nest two P elements inside your article element. The first one's text should be French vanilla and the second's text should be $3. Start below the existing coffee price pair. Add the following coffee and prices using article elements with nested two P elements inside each. As before, the first P element's text should contain the coffee flavor and the second should contain the text that has the price. Okay. So I'm just going to copy this. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 more. So 2, 3, 4, 5. And we will change this one to caramel macchiato. And the price will be $3.75. And this one will change to pumpkin spice. Whoops. The capital. And this one will be $3.50. And then we've got hazelnut for $4. After that, we've got mocha for $4.50. Okay. And if you look over here, you can see it. The flavors and prices are currently stacked on top of each other and centered with their respective P elements. It would be nicer if the flavor was on the left and if the price was on the right. Add a class name flavor to French vanilla. Okay. Oh, flavor. Now use your new flavor class as a selector and text align properties values to the left. Okay. Next, you want to align the price to the right. So add a class named price to your P element. Now align the text to the right for your elements with the price class. That's kind of what you want. Now it would be nice if the flavor and the price were in the same line. P elements are block level elements, so they take up the entire width of their parent element. To get them in the same line, you will have to apply some styling to the P elements so that they behave more like inline elements. Add a class attribute to the value item with a value item to the first article element underneath the coffee heading. The P elements are nestled in an article element with the class attribute of item. You can style all P elements nested anywhere in elements with the class named item like this. Okay, so using the above selector, add a display property with the value inline block so the P elements behave more like inline. Okay, so let's see if we did that correctly. Oh, item P, okay. There we go. That's closer, but the price didn't stay over to the right. That is because the inline block elements only take up the width of their content. To spread them out, add a width property to the flavor and price selectors, class selectors, so they have a value of 50% each. Well, that did not work. Styling the P elements as inline block and placing them in separate lines in code creates extra spaces between the right and the first P element, causing the second one to shift to the next line. One way to fix this is to make each P element's width a little less than 50%. So change it to 49%. Okay, so 49%, 49%. There we go. Step 40. That worked, but there's still little space on the right of the price. You could keep trying various percentages for widths. Instead, use the backspace key on your keyboard to move the P element with the class price next to the P element with the class favor so that they are in the same line on the editor. Make sure there is no space between them. There you go. Now go ahead and change both flavor and price class widths back to 50% again. Step 42. Now that you know it works, you can change the remaining article and P elements to match the first step. Start by adding a class item to the other article elements. I'm just going to copy this, paste, paste, paste. Now position the other P elements to be on the same line with no space between them. To complete the styling, add a applicable class names flavor and price to all the remaining P elements. There we go. Step 45. If you make the width of the page preview smaller, you will notice at some point some of the text on the left starts wrapping around the next line. This is because the width of the P elements on the left side can only take up 50% of its space. Since you know the prices on the right have significantly fewer characters, change the flavor class width to be 75% and the price class width to be 25%. There we go. You will come back to styling the menu in a few steps, but for now, go ahead and add a second section element below the first for displaying the desserts offered at the cafe. So we'll go down here to the bottom, create a new section element. Add a H2 element. With the text desserts. Add an empty article element under the desserts heading. Give it the class attribute with the value item. Nest two P elements inside your article element. The first one's text should be donut, the second text should be $1.50. Put both of them on the same line, making sure there's no space between them. Step 50. For the two P elements you just added, add dessert as a value of the first P's element class attribute and the value price to the second P. Okay, so something does not look right. You added the correct class attribute with the value to the P element with donut as its text, but you have not defined a selector for it. Since flavor class selector already has its properties you want, just add a dessert class to name it. There we go. Below the dessert that you just added, the rest of the desserts and the prices, including 3 more article items, each with 2 nested P elements. Each element should have the correct dessert and the price text, and all of them should have the correct classes. Okay. So I'm just going to copy paste this, bring it down 3 more times. Change this to cherry pie, cheesecake, cinnamon roll, and the price $2.75, $3, and $2.50. Oh, we need articles. Okay. There we go. Had some spelling errors. Now you can give your menu some space between the content and its sides with the various padding properties. Give the menu class a padding left and padding right with the same value of 20 pixels. Now try adding 20 pixels px of padding to the top and bottoms of the menu. So sweet. Since all four sides of the menu have the same internal spacing, go ahead and delete the four properties and use a single padding property with the value of 20 px, meaning like padding top, bottom, left, right, they're all 20 px. You can just put a generic padding property and just put 20 px and it'll do it to all of them. So we'll go like this, get rid of this. There we go. The current width of the menu will always take up 80% of the body. Coffee and dessert appear far apart. Add a max width property to the menu class with a value of 500 px to prevent it from growing too wide. You can change the font family of the text to make it look different from the default font of your browser. Each browser has common fonts available to it. Change all the text in your body by adding a font family property with the value sans serif. This is a fairly common font and is very easily readable. Okay, so the font changed. Step number 58. It's a bit boring for all the text to have the same font family. You can still have the majority of the text in sans serif and make just the H1 and H2 elements different by using a different selector. Style both H1 and H2 elements so that these elements use impact font. There we go. You can add a fallback value for the font family by adding another font named separated by a comma. Fallbacks are usually used in instances where the initial font is not found or available. So add a fallback font of serif after the impact. So we'll do comma, serif. There you go. Make the established 2020 text italicized by creating an established class selector and giving it the font style property of italic. There we go. Now apply established class to it, so we gotta obviously established, and now it's italicized. Okay, now apply the established class. Okay. The typography of the heading elements is set by the default values of the user's browsers. Add two new type selectors, H1 and H2, use the font size property for both, and use the value 40px for H1 and 30px for H2. Add a footer element below the main element where you can add some additional information. Inside the footer, add a P element and nest the anchor hey element inside the, okay, so add a second P element below, okay. With the text 123 FreeCodeCamp drive. Okay. You can use the HR element to display a divider between the sections of different content. First, add an HR element between the P element with the class established and the first section element. Okay, and they're self-closing. The default properties of a HR element will make it appear as thin as a thin light gray line. You can change the height of the line by specifying the value of the height property. Change the height, so change the background color to brown. Notice that the gray color along the edges of the line, those edges are known as borders. Each side of the element can have a different color, or they can all be the same, making all the edges of the HR element the same color as the background of it using the border color property. Notice how the thickness of the line looks bigger. The default value for property named border width is 1 pixel. For all the edges of the HR elements, by dividing the border to the same color as the background, the total height of the line is 5 pixels, 3 pixels plus the top of the bouquet. Change the height property of the HR to be 2 pixels so that the total height of it becomes 4. Go ahead and add another HR element between the main element and the footer element. To create a little bit more room around the menu, add 20 pixels of space on the inside of the body element by using the padding property. Focusing on the menu items and prices, there is a fairly large gap between each line. Target all the P elements nested in the elements with a class named item and set their top and bottom margin to be 5 pixels. Step 74. Using the same style selector in the previous step, make the font size of the items and prices larger by using the value 18 pixels. Change the margin bottom to 5 pixels. However, now the space between the cinnamon roll menu item and the second HR element doesn't match the space between the HR and the coffee heading. Add some more space by creating a class named bottom line using 25 pixels for the margin top. Okay. Now add a bottom line class to the HR element. Now you're going to be styling the footer element. To keep CSS organized, add a comment at the end of the styles.css with the text footer. Step 78, moving down to the footer element, make it have all the text value 14 pixels. Okay, so Step 79, the default color of the link that has not yet been clicked is on typically blue. The default color of the link that has already been visited from a page is typically purple. To make the footer links the same color regardless if a link has been visited, use a type selector for the anchor element and use the value black for the color property. Okay. You can change the properties of the link when the link has actually been visited by using a pseudo selector that looks like a visited, property name, property value. Change the color of the footer, visit our website link, to be gray when the user has visited. Okay. Step 81. You change properties of a link when the mouse hovers over them by using a pseudo selector that looks like a hover, property name, property value. Okay, so change the color of the footer for visit our website to brown when it's hover. Okay, so a hover. Step 82, you can change the properties of a link when the link is actually being clicked by using a pseudo selector that looks like a active. Change the color of the footer to be white when clicked on. A active. So it's gray, then turns brown. Then when you click it, it turns white. To keep the same color theme you have already been using, black and brown, change the color from when the link is visited to black and to use brown for when it's actually being clicked. There we go. The menu text Camper Cafe has a different space from the top than the addresses space from the bottom of the menu. This is due to the browser having some default top margin for the H1 element. Change the top margin of the H1 element to 0 to remove all top margin. There we go. So it just pulls everything up a little bit. To remove some vertical space between H1 and the established 2020, change the bottom margin of H1 to 15 pixels. Okay. So it just tucks this in now. Now that the top spacing looks good, the space between the address at the bottom of the menu is a little bit bigger than the space at the top of the menu and the H1 element. To decrease the default margin space between the address P element, create a class selector named address. So address with the value of 5px for margin bottom. Now apply the address class to the P element containing the address. The menu looks good, but other than the coffee beans background image, it's mainly just text. Under coffee, add an image using the URL. Okay, so we'll copy that. And give the image a alternate value of coffee icon. Cool, so we now have a little coffee icon. The image you added is not centered. Okay, so to make the image behave like the heading elements, create an image type selector and use the value block for the display property and use the applicable left margin, right margin. Okay, so. Add one last image underneath desserts heading and use the URL. Okay. Step 91. It would be nice if the vertical space between H2 elements and their associated icons were smaller. The H2 elements have a default top and bottom margin space, So you could change the bottom margin of the H2 elements to say 0 or another number. There's an easier way, simply add a negative top margin to the image elements to pull them up from their current positions. Negative values are created using a in front of the value. To complete this project, go ahead and use the negative top margins of 25 in the image type selector. Okay. I think we need a margin bottom as well. Oh, nope, we're good. I think that's it. That is the last step of the project. So if we pull it up, this is what our project should look like. Pretty cool. So we've got our camper, cafe, established 2020, coffee with the icon, the different kinds of coffee we sell for the price, desserts, dessert icon, different types of desserts, the price, website, address, and that's it, guys.